Good morning. Welcome to Isaiah chapter 6. It's a beautiful chapter where we see Isaiah being called to be a prophet. And it begins in verse 1. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above it stood seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face. With 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the posts of the door were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the house was filled with smoke. So I said, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a live coal, which he had taken with the tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth with it and said, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your iniquity is taken away, and your sin is purged. I also heard a voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then I said, Here am I, send me. Isaiah has a vision of the Lord. He sees the Lord, he sees the seraphim around the Lord, giving him glory and praise, proclaiming, Holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And he experiences some of the majesty of the Lord. The posts of the doors were shaken as they are crying out. The house is filled with smoke. And in seeing God, Isaiah realizes his own sinfulness. Just like we don't understand how dark we are until we see light, or how black something is until you put it up against white. Without that contrast, we sometimes can mask our sin. But in the face of God, being in the midst of perfection, we see so clearly our imperfection. And Isaiah cries out, I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of people of unclean lips. I am a sinner, and I dwell in a land of sinners. And my eyes have seen the King. I'm undone. I'm now in the presence of perfection. And I know I don't belong there because I am imperfect and I can't abide in that place. And God does a beautiful thing. One of the seraphim flies over to him with a live coal which he had taken with the tongs from the altar. So from this altar that's before God, the altar is the place of sacrifice. A coal from that altar, representing the sacrifice, is touched to his lips, and he is told that his iniquity is taken away, that his sin has been purged, that through the sacrifice, he had forgiveness for his sin because the penalty was paid for by another. It's interesting, it says a live coal here. I believe that there is a sense in which we're looking at this coal as not just a coal being a fiery coal or a live coal, but a live coal. I just think about the Lord going in our place, laying down his life, becoming that sacrifice for us. And his sin is taken away. And then after that, God says to him, Who shall I send? Who will go? And Isaiah says, Here I am, send me. Look at the progress of things here. There's the revelation of God. Then there is the acknowledgement of our sinfulness. God has to take it upon himself to purge the sin from us, not by just waving it away, but through the use of a substitutionary sacrifice. And after that, the calling of God on a life and the response to that call. This is something that we should be able to trace in our own life in terms of coming to Christ. It all begins with seeing God. All of us had to have an encounter in some way. It may not have been a vision like Isaiah had, but there was a revelation that God was real, that his word was true. And in the revelation of seeing God, we then saw ourselves for the first time as sinners needing a Savior. When we realize that, and we realize there's nothing we can do about it, God steps in. Jesus is shown to us truly as the Lamb who takes away the sin of the world. And our sin is wiped away because of the work that was done on Calvary. And then God sends a call to our life. Now that we've come into a relationship with him, now that we can truly be aligned with his work because sin is no longer separating us from God, he calls. And the question is, will you answer? Isaiah said, "Here I am, send me." And that should be the response of every heart that's had a real encounter with God. But it is a scary response to make, because when we say, "I will go," we are releasing ourselves wholly to the will of God. We give up control of our life and we start responding only to the orders that are given us from the divine master. There is no better thing to do. There is no better way to live your life than in step with God according to his will, because he's perfect and he knows better, and he never uses us or abuses us because he loves us. And his perfect love gives us the ability to trust his awesome power, because if he loves us so much, he will care for us. And then we can say, this is a God who I can serve under any circumstance. The God who loved me so much to die for me, to take my place upon the altar, to sacrifice himself for my sin. This is a God I will serve. And when we're convinced of that, we will also say, "Here am I, send me." Have a great day. Bye.